Hey guys, Jim here with another video for you. This is 50 Years in Film, 1989. But before we begin, at the end of this video, if you like what you see, please give me a thumbs up, a possible subscribe, and most important, I cannot stress enough, please leave comments. I would really love to hear from you. Now, before we actually get into 1989, I have to immediately bring this up. I missed another one, guys. From 1987, I missed Walter Hill's Extreme Prejudice. Again, brain fart on my part. This is a great movie. Very underrated movie. A lot of people have never heard of this movie. I got this, as you can see, as part of the Vestron line. If you get a chance, you can get this movie from Vestron very cheaply, and it's a great movie with a great cast. So, from 1987, I give you Extreme Prejudice. Now we're going to do what we always do. We're going to jump around in genres and such. But stick around until the end of this video, because I'm going to tell you what my plans are for the remaining part of this series. So, we're going to start off. Normally we start off with comedy, but because it's part of my Steven Spielberg box set with this lovely display of 1989, I figured we would start with Always. This is a remake of a movie from the 40s called A Guy Called Joe, starring Richard Dreyfuss, Holly Hunter, John Goodman, and her final screen appearance, the legendary Audrey Hepburn. This is a love story, plain and simple. It's not exactly my favorite Spielberg movie. I generally don't like that type of genre. But with a cast like this, and the fact that Steven Spielberg directed it, it's a high quality film. So that's the beginning of 1989, Always. Now we're going to go back to the normal way of doing things. We're going to start off with the comedies. And first we have the most successful comedy of that year, Back to the Future 2. Starring Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. There's the original one sheet. Quite honestly, I have mixed feelings about this movie. There are things about it that I really enjoy, but I feel about the Back to the Future trilogy kind of the same way I feel about the Matrix films. The first one is really all you need. The second and third one are entertaining, but the first one is really all you need. But it's still a very good movie. Then we had the most surprising comedy of 1989 from my Bill and Ted's Most Excellent Collection from Shout Select. That's Bogus Journey, sorry. I give you Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, starring Keanu Reeves, Alex Winter, and the late, great George Carlin. I will never forget seeing this movie for the first time. I went in completely blind. Only thing I knew about it was that George Carlin was in it, and I'm a huge George Carlin fan. My God, I love this movie. I have always loved this movie. And if you would have asked me in 1989, if that guy right there, Keanu Reeves, would become not only arguably one of the biggest movie stars in the world, but also the biggest action star in the world, I would have thought you were high. But Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is absolutely terrific. I love this movie. The second biggest comedy hit that year was Parenthood, starring Steve Martin, Rick Moranis, and an incredible supporting cast. Too many to mention here. Directed by Ron Howard. I absolutely love this movie. It's so good. And Keanu Reeves is also in this, playing more or less the same character that he does in Bill and Ted, but with even a lesser vocabulary. But Parenthood is a great movie. Then we've got Joe Dante's The Burbs, starring Tom Hanks, Carrie Fisher, and Bruce Dern. The Burbs is an acquired taste. I know a lot of people do not like this movie. I love it. I think it's absolutely hilarious. but it is very dark. Just the way Joe Dante usually does it. I love this movie. Then we've got Blake Edwards' directed Skin Deep, starring John Ritter in what I feel is his best screen performance. This is by far not his best movie he was ever in, but I think he gives his best performance ever in this movie. The movie itself is okay. It's uneven, but there are moments of absolute hilarity in this movie. But my favorite comedy that year was The War of the Roses, starring Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner, and Danny DeVito. This movie was also directed by Danny DeVito. You want to talk dark comedy, it doesn't get much darker than The War of the Roses. This is a movie about divorce, and it is absolutely hysterical in every way. But again, War of the Roses is an acquired taste. I understand a lot of people do not like this movie. However, I feel those people are wrong because War of the Roses is absolutely hysterical. Now we're going into the dramas. We're going to start off with Bond. And in 1989, it was Licensed to Kill, the second and final James Bond on-screen appearance from Timothy Dalton. And quite frankly, he deserves better. I think he is great in this movie. But unlike all of the other James Bond movies, this is not a spy movie. This is a revenge thriller. That's it. He is on a revenge trip because one of his best friends almost gets killed. I'm not going into the plot. Basically, this is not some evil mastermind guy trying to take over the world. The bad guy in this movie is basically a drug cartel member. That's it. But Bond's not even after him for the drugs. He's basically out to get revenge. Period. I love this movie. It's gritty as hell. It's not the best James Bond movie, but it's one of the best ones from the 80s. Continuing with the dramas, another Walter Hill movie, since I forgot Extreme Prejudice from 87. This is his effort from 89, Johnny Handsome, starring Mickey Rourke, Morgan Freeman, Lance Henriksen, and a host of others. This is a really good movie. It's an underrated film noir in my eyes, but it's just a solid crime drama. And I believe Kino is releasing a 4K of this. I'm not sure. I did hear something about it, but don't quote me on that. And then we're going to a war drama. And it is definitely a drama, not a typical war movie. This is Casualties of War, directed by Brian De Palma, starring Michael J. Fox, Sean Penn, John Leguizamo, and John C. Reilly, among others. This is an incredibly hard, difficult watch. It's based on a true event. You can read the synopsis there. I won't go into it too much, other than to say that this movie is absolutely horrific in the best possible way. It's an incredibly well-made movie. It's incredibly intense, and Sean Penn is terrifying in this movie. Again, I don't know how to recommend this movie other than the fact to say that it is a very, very well-made movie, but know going in that it is a very difficult watch. But that's Casualties of War. Now we're going into the action. The only science fiction movie that I have from this year is Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, directed by William Shatner. Quite honestly, this movie sucks. I've never liked it. I didn't like it the first time I've seen it. I watched it a couple of times since that. Through the years, I even gave all of these films another watch before I started doing these films. And yeah, Final Frontier's a mess. But now we got some great action coming with one of the best sequels ever. Lethal Weapon 2, starring Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, and directed by Richard Donner. Sequels generally suck. This movie far from sucks. Joe Pesci made his first appearance in the Lethal Weapon franchise in this episode, and he's great. He doesn't get too annoying until the third movie, and then by the fourth movie, well, we'll get there. But Lethal Weapon 2 is a fantastic action movie. And it's one of the best sequels of all time. Speaking of great action sequels, we're back to Indiana Jones. With the third chapter of the Raiders of the Lost Ark trilogy, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Co-starring Denholm Elliott and the late, great Sean Connery and River Phoenix. And Denholm Elliott, who also passed away, I'm sorry. This is a great movie. It is so much fun. Raiders of the Lost Ark is still my favorite Indiana Jones movie, but this one's definitely the most entertaining. I've always thought of the movies, each one having their own flavor. The first one is an action movie. The second one is a horror movie. This one is a comedy. The fourth one tried to be a science fiction movie, but that movie is an abomination. And because of that, I have not seen the fifth movie. But without a doubt, this is a great film. And then we go to Roadhouse. Patrick Swayze in all of his glory, with the wonderful Sam Elliott. I absolutely love this movie, but I have mixed feelings about it. Here's why. This movie was released on May 19th, 1989. My first wedding was May 20th, 1989. And my first wife was obsessed with Patrick Swayze. So on our honeymoon, we actually went and saw this movie. But you know what? I love this movie. I loved it then. I love it now. Me and her are no longer married. We got divorced 5 years later. But I'll always love Roadhouse. Unfortunately, though, I cannot think of one without thinking of the other. So, but Roadhouse is absolutely awesome. Now we're going into the horror. We're going to start off with a couple of sequels. First, oh God, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Or, as it should have correctly been titled, Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes a Boat Ride. Because he doesn't get to New York until the last 15-20 minutes of the movie, and it's actually Vancouver. This movie sucks. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people love this movie. They have, fond memories of watching it when they were a kid and this and that and the other. This movie sucks. It's just, ugh. I thought that this would be the absolute worst Friday the 13th movie ever. I was wrong. The next sequel, which is better than Friday the 13th, 8, The Fly 2. Directed by Chris Wallace, who did the effects of the original Fly, and starring Eric Stoltz and Daphne Zuniga. This movie doesn't hold a candle to the original Fly, but I love this movie. The effects are on another level disgusting, and it's just a fun movie. But it is dark, like the original. And there's actually a scene in this movie that is more heartbreaking than in any tearjerker movie I've seen, probably in my entire life. If you've seen The Fly, you know what I'm talking about. This is a good movie. I really like it. And then we've got Wes Craven's Shocker. That's the original one sheet. You know what? I love this movie. I don't care who knows it. Most people hate this movie. They think it's ridiculous. Yeah, that's the point. This movie's supposed to be ridiculous. And my God, it's so much fun. It played like a rock concert, just like The Lost Boys. And no, this movie, it doesn't even stand in The Lost Boys' shadow. It's so far down the chain. But I love Shocker. I think it's one of Wes Craven's most entertaining movies. This horror movie is great, though. Pet Sematary. Directed by Mary Lambert and written by Stephen King based on his novel. Stephen King has gone on record to say that Pet Sematary is the only book that he ever wrote that scared him. And he almost didn't publish it because of the trauma involved of possibly losing a child. And yeah, Pet Sematary is very dark, but very good. It's a iconic Stephen King title for a reason. It's a great movie. But we're changing gears because normally we end on a horror movie, but this year we're not, because 1989, without a doubt, was the year of Batman. Tim Burton's first crack at Batman, starring Jack Nicholson as the Joker and Michael Keaton as Batman. And when I say 1989 was about Batman, I mean it. You could not go anywhere that year without seeing the bat signal somewhere. This movie was huge, and it catapulted Tim Burton, who was becoming a very popular director at that point. Beetlejuice and Pee-wee's Big Adventure were out at that point, and both of them were decent-sized hits. But Batman was a totally different animal, and like I said, you could not go anywhere that year without seeing the bat signal somewhere. Because of the success of this movie, Tim Burton basically got carte blanche for the rest of his career. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes not so much. But without a doubt, Batman is definitely an iconic movie, marked by iconic performances, especially from the first two main leads, Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. So that's the end of 1989. And before going any further into the 50 years of film, I decided we're going to break it up a little bit. So I'm going to start going through the years, through the 80s, 1 year at a time, and I'm doing my top 10 of each year. My favorite movies, not the best, my favorite. I'm going to do 2 years per video, and I'm going to post them 5 days in a row starting tomorrow. Then next week, I'm going to post a top 25 for the decade of the 80s. And then at that point, we will continue through the 90s and do the same thing from that point on. At the end of the 90s, we'll do the same thing. End of the aughts, do the same thing. And to be honest, I'm terrified because I don't know how I'm going to do this. Ranking the 25 videos from the 70s was difficult, but this is going to be impossible for me because there are so many movies that I love. But hopefully you continue to take this journey with me. And if you do, hopefully you'll agree with me. If you don't, I would really, really love to hear your comments in that section and give me your rankings and we can compare. So I hope you will continue this journey with me, guys. And if you do, please give me a thumbs up, possible subscribe, and most of all, leave those comments. I cannot wait to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next one.